Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter, and welcome to another .NET video. This time, I'm going to show you a cool feature that is included in .NET 10. .NET 10 isn't released yet as of recording this video. It's going to be released somewhere in November. However, you can obviously try the preview versions, but also currently it's less of a preview version and more of a release candidate. So if I do .NET version, you're going to see that I am on .NET 10, but it's an RC1, which stands for Release Candidate 1. There is a couple of things that don't work quite well, and one thing that is outright broken, but they are already, the fixes for that have been merged into .NET. They will be released, obviously, with the full .NET 10. There was a light regression that was introduced. So the feature that I wanted to show you is file-based applications. What can you imagine under that? Well, normally, if you want to make a C# project, you would probably do .NET New, right? And you would do console or something, or maybe web API, which would scaffold the entire project for you, and it would create a CS proj, which would be the reference point for example, .NET Run. That would either look for a CS proj solution file, or you could point it to either. However, now you have the ability to pretty much .NET Run a script.cs, right? You can have that CS proj be basically implicit. So we're going to play around with that a little bit, and I'll show you how cool that is and sort of how other sort of quirks operate within that. So for that, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to make script.cs. And now we're going to move here to Visual Studio Code. So in our script.cs, we're going to do a standard console write line hello world. Okay, pretty standard hello world application. And if we .NET run script.cs, again, having .NET 10, because this won't work with .NET 9 or earlier, you can see that, hey, that pretty much works. It did exactly what we expected. Very cool for learning. We don't have to, I think a lot of like barrier to entry in some way for .NET is a lot of the structure, especially for beginner programmers. And people sort of just interested in the language, especially if this is their first programming language. This is eliminating a lot of that sort of like initial learning hurdle. However, let's refactor this a little bit. Let's make a method, call it print hello, right? And we're going to pass in a name. Okay, that's, oops. Let me do this. I'm a little rusty. I haven't been making tutorials for a while. And we're going to interpolate the name into the right line. And then instead of hard-coding it, we're going to print hello, and we're going to pass in world. So we're going to get an identical, so we know it changes. Hello, Peter. Egotism. Let's see, .NET Run script CS. And as you can see, hello, Peter is printed. However, we can also assume that we're gonna, let's say we export a environment variable. So we set an environment variable called username, right? All caps, and it's gonna be like the Peter, okay? Just so we again see some changes. I'm going to export this. Again, the sort of like mechanics of how this is done sort of don't matter. Obviously, you can, if you're on Windows, you could set it in a pretty much similar way through PowerShell, or you could set it like in your system environment variables. But you get the point. This doesn't have to be a username. This could be a token or some sort of an API key, something that we might need. And so let's say we now want to use the environment variable one. So let's say we do name. And it's going to be environment.get environment variable. And we're going to, what did I name it? Username? Yeah. Username. So this is going to try to fetch this environment variable. And then we're going to use that to pass it into print hello. This technically should still do pretty much the same thing. except, and we're getting, this is something that I'm going to get into. Notice that there still is a build step. This is not interpreting the language. This is still doing a standard sort of compilation and standard running as you're used to. The difference is that the CS proj that it sort of needs or requires for the compilation is implicit. It is sort of like assumed to be sort of default. So you still see compilation warnings, and you still can .NET build the script.cs, even though if you really like look through the directory, there is no there's no like, as we are used to, like bin or obj folders. I mean, they exist, I believe. I'm not completely sure. I haven't looked into where it is, but it's probably in some sort of a temporary directory managed by .NET. So what I wanted to show, however, is that obviously we have this compilation warning that I intentionally caused for possible null reference. This could be also the inverse of that, where you don't get nullable reference warnings and you do want them. In this case, the defaults are very sane, so we're going to go the other way around. Let's say we want to turn off nullable references, which is not a great move, but we can try to do that. And if you look up online how to do that, like, you're going to find that actually you need to modify your CS proj with the property group nullable and then hit like enable or disable, right? And obviously we can't do that because the CS proj is implicit here. We don't have one. And that's why we have a new preprocessor directives. So again, preprocessor directives are sort of like the hashtag things where you get to do like an if debug type of stuff. Like, that's probably where you know it from. But you also get to do these new fancy one where it's like hashtag colon, and now you get to use one of the sort of predefined ones. I'm going to open the docs later. We're going to take a look at sort of like what's available and where to find what is available. So don't worry about that. Just sort of like check out what we're doing right now. And so you get to do property, and then you get to type in something like nullable equals disable, which is basically the same thing as inside your CS proj setting that sort of, nullable thing to disable that. And you can see, as you can see, OmniSharp or whatever VS Code uses for this on Linux, figured out that, or did some sort of a restore or sort of build in the background that figured out that actually, see, now that is completely fine. And even though warnings don't necessarily appear multiple times, if I build this or run it for that matter, you can see that we kind of don't have that warning anymore. That is a pretty cool example. Let me actually clear everything, and we're going to move on to another example. So first of all, I hope this is a bit of an idea of like, okay, well, so you're not completely like out of luck for common things you might want to do. Another thing that you, generally speaking, might want to do, and that ends up being a pretty cool feature, is where I see a great potential for this is in, let's say you have a GitHub project or any other sort of open source project, and you want to show examples of how to use your library. Normally, you would probably have like some sort of a compilable project inside, or you would have it inside README. But if you have it inside your README, then it can like fall out of date, right? And I bet you've seen it yourself. You open a library, you go through the README, but the sample that they have copy pasted, it just like, or wiki, it just doesn't compile anymore because there's been changes to the underlying library. So you might have normally you might have like a simple console app, right, with like some examples, but then that's also like pretty big, right? Like, there's still a CS proj. It seems a little too big. Here, what you get to do as another directive is you get to include a project. I prepared a little sample here just so we don't waste a lot of time of me figuring out what we need to do of one of my open source applications or libraries, however you want to look at it. which is Amnesia CLI. The mechanics of this don't really matter for the purposes of this demonstration, but it is basically a CLI for configuring things about a specific like video game being Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Point is that it is something that I just have included here. You might have seen it earlier here, Amnesia CLI. If we actually tree on top of that, you're going to see that we have like a bunch of directories. There's, especially if I scroll like all the way up, I probably might have limited the search a little bit, but there's SRC, and under SRC we have both the Amnesia CLI like standard sort of entry point. It's a console app, but we also have a infrastructure and core. But since core in this case, this is using like pretty bad design. Actually, it's using like an anemic model where the core library actually includes mostly abstractions. Is not great. We see that shouldn't necessarily be done. It's a bit of an anti-pattern. But in this case, it helps us because we just need to include infrastructure, since that actually includes most of the source code. But that's just, context in case you were sort of wondering. What we're going to use from there is, so first of all, like, hey, we just included a project just like this by a relative path. This is taking it from the point of, where it's running. Here, what we're going to do first is we're going to .NET build the script.cs, because in its current position, or in its current, yes, because there's technically nothing. Let's just right line something so we can properly build it. You need to have something at least. So in this case, we're building it so that it's properly like linked. It builds the sort of reference project just like you're used to from like Visual Studio or any other sort of IDE, right? And that gives you, it just helps the IntelliSense, especially in VS Code, because it gets a little confused by like all this. Ooh, you're just including the stuff like from a file, like, whoa. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a writer. In the application that I wrote, we have a Amnesia file writer here, which we can just sort of instantiate. And then using the writer, we're going to basically create some sort of a file. We're going to create a level that is from level.create pattern. And then simply we're just going to use the writer to write to file exactly. And we're going to name it like mymap.map. And it's going to be the level. Okay, so it's just a sample. So this would be a great example, like just looking at this, honestly, you don't even have to have it in a file, right? Although a directory with examples, so imagine that you have a repository, examples directory, and then in it you have like new level.cs, right? And this is inside that. And it shows you like, when I'm looking at this as a sort of like library consumer, this is all I need to know. Hey, I know like what project you're referencing, I know the using directives that you need, and I know exactly like how to do the bit of code that that you're trying to show me. So already I feel like this is really, really cool. At least for the bare minimum for the documentation purpose of that. Now, granted, the thing is that the best kind of documentation is the documentation that's written so well that it is borderline executable. Well, in this case, it just is executable. So in this case, .NET run script.cs, and once this is restored and built, as we can see, there is my map.map, right? And if I cat it, my map, it is some sort of XML that if you had the Amnesia sort of level editor, you would be able to just open and literally like actually open the map that is there. Let's delete that for now. So that was a great example, but let's also, this is linking a project from a relative location. So obviously the script needs to be placed right next to this, right? And unless you want to have like a bunch of like go back up relative directories, this is a little clunky still. We can do even better because we can reference direct packages like NuGet packages. Again, something that you would normally do with like .NET add package or something, sort of a command, or with Visual Studio or like Writer or whatever you're using, right? So what we get to do is we get to do package directive where, let's use one of our very common ones, new 10 soft JSON, and let's take version 13.04, which is the latest one, at least as of today. And just like that, we got like newtons of JSON, which like, by the way, is really cool. So hey, you can see that they're doing some restores here, and that's already like really cool. So let's JSON output the map that we just generated, right? So we're gonna get JSON and JSON convert, I believe. Yep, newtons of JSON. Serialize object. We're gonna pass in the level, and then I think there's formatting indented. These days, honestly, like I know nobody asked, but I kind of use system text JSON. But obviously, like I want to show you adding a NuGet package, so obviously we're doing that. And then let's console write that line JSON. Okay, so now if we run the project again, .NET run script CS, after we create the map, we also, boom, 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 you can see, got the JSON of the map. So this is all the map data. I probably can, boom, do one of these. And as you can see, yeah, we just have sort of a JSON output. There. Okay, so that's very cool. And we're going to move to one more example that I wanted to show you that is pretty cool. And that is, again, for like learning purposes and for trying out small things and learning like C# and learning the ecosystem. This is like huge. This is, in my, like, genuinely, in my opinion, this is like really big. For demonstrations and purposes. A lot of the times I've already used it in my day-to-day life. Like, you know, those like, oh, well, what is like the default toString for a datetime? Like, what does that look like again? What's the format? Because like, I don't remember. There's nothing easier than just like outright making a script.cs and then, or anything, you know, app.cs. You can name it whatever you want, by the way, it doesn't have to be script. And just like do that and console write line some stuff and see like how that works, right? And just sort of try things on the fly. We're going to try something a little more complex, a little more cool, something with a specific, another directive that I haven't shown. So let's make a, let's open it in code, API.cs. So I'm kind of leaking what we're going to do here already. Yes, we're going to make a web API. Again, a pretty like big thing, but other languages like really have that already. I mean, think of Node.js, right? And a default like sort of app.js. Making an API with like a get endpoint is like trivial, right? Like you make a couple of lines and it feels like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. I wish I could do that in .NET, right? But you have to do like .NET New web API, especially for like really like quick, dirty mocking purposes. You wouldn't want to have this as a production thing, but scripts, especially like, again, you know, I use GNU Linux, guilty. So obviously like I really like a lot of like custom scripts that I can just sort of write and sort of use. These sort of like almost system utilities that you write for yourself, they can boost productivity like a lot. So what we're going to do here first, so we're going to have to use SDK because the SDK is different, and that's what this is another directive that I wanted to show. We're going to use Microsoft .NET SDK web. So this will, and again, there's many SDKs. If you look at them, there's some for like Maui apps. You know, there's some for like what is it like? You know, like the WinForms things, but WPF, I think. Although like .NET MAUI is probably like the modern approach here these days. So you get to use all sorts of SDKs or specifically target Windows 10, so Windows 10 SDK. So this is like the purpose. Obviously, you would have to have that at the very top, honestly, in like the root of your CS proj normally. But here you get to just like sort of address it like that. And I have this sort of referenced over here, so I don't have to like remember all this because this is a little crazy, but you could remember this because this isn't like that wild. We'll make a builder, web application, create builder, well, passing args, but here's the catch. args currently will always be empty. You can't pass arguments to your script. So normally .NET run API.cs. You could do like param1, param2, right? You could do this, and you are going to be able to do this ever since, like, if there is a release candidate 2, then from that point, if there isn't and there's already just like the deployed version, then from the real one, it's just a light regression in the RC1, but it is fixed. So you will be able to do that. Just currently on the version that I'm using right now, args don't do any, like, they're going to always be empty. But we're going to use them nonetheless because it doesn't like matter in this case, right? And with the builder, there's one more little caveat that I've figured out. You need to configure the JSON options, because by default, it's just going to be throwing after trying to serialize anything. So there's just one little, let's actually like be civilized humans here. Serialize options, type info resolver chain, and we're going to add a default JSON type info resolver. I know, a little mouthful, so there's still a tiny bit. This is the only like crazy, like sort of above standard thing, because other than that, it's just builder build. So we don't even do, well, here, obviously, like we could register any other service. So we're getting dependency injection with this, or DI container sort of for free here with the builder, as you're used to from other apps. We're also going to do, and here you get to do standard ASP.NET stuff, right? So use HTTPS, use HTTPS redirection, like, for example, right? It's not going to it's not going to play a role inside our demo here, but just so you know that this is a sort of standard program CS in some way. And we're going to use minimal APIs to map get a test route, and we're going to create a little example. So in our little example, we're going to have just quick and dirty record user, and the user is going to have a like name and a like email, an email. And then from here, we're going to return results as we're used to .json, right? Like standard stuff. And then in it, we're just going to pass in the user, where it's going to be Peter, and email is going to be peter@example.com, right? And of course, like, this is a standard like .NET thing. So like, hey, if we want to like really simplify it even further, we can use like lambda expression here, right? And so if you look at this little example, this just like that first of all, that, like, to me as a .NET developer, like looking at this, that's insane. Like, we're going like really minimal. That's just the fact that this is just one file containing the entire ASP.NET application. It feels crazy. But maybe I'm just easily excitable, who knows? So if I .NET run API.cs, you're going to see that after this is like built, and some warnings are sort of standardized here. Oh, wait, hold on. Did I run the right thing? Did I not run? Excuse me? Hello? Is this saved? Let's cat API. Let's do some live debugging. .NET build API.cs, just to be like, sure, maybe it's just not, maybe it's using the previously built, which requires can break functionality. Yeah, but like, well, we are pretty much aware. .NET run. Oh, I am goofy. I am the goofiest of them all. App run, without it, your app won't run. But there you go. Hey, this is just part of life, part of debugging. This is how you solve problems. You run into them over and over. As you can see, now it's hosted properly on localhost 5000. And that means that we can curl HTTP localhost 5000 / test endpoint, right? And if we curl that, you can see we got the JSON back. So this is just like the minimal minimal API, but it still is like doing like it's still an actual sort of real API. I think this could be really cool for mocking or sort of testing an API. If you have an application and you don't quite yet have the API, or you have it but it's like really complex, or it's unavailable for whatever reason at the time, you might want to just sort of quickly mock it. This is something that you normally would probably use some sort of an application for. However, you can just sort of write one of these for yourself and even include the project, right? Like actual sort of like, so that the API can return instead of like these like fake entities. It could actually return a real sort of model entity that you genuinely use in your system, and you could just super quickly like mock some stuff like that. So that's very cool. That's the thing. And then I want to show you one final cool thing about this. We're gonna go back to our script. Sure, yeah. And we're gonna do something very cool. So normally you need to like .NET run it, right? But if you're on Linux as well, you don't have to just .NET run it. You can use the interpreter. You can use sort of .NET as the interpreter for this type of script. And this is done commonly with like the shebang. You might have heard that shebang at the start of a file, which kind of says, hey, which interpreter for this script should we use, right? And usually it's like bin bash or something like that. There is, I think we can just ls, and I think it's, is it user bin.net? Yeah, .net, right? So that exists. So user bin.net. At the beginning of our file, well, we can do shebang, right? And then do user, or it's, sorry, I keep saying, I know it's not user, it's USR. I think it stands for like universal resources or something like that. I keep saying user, but it's okay. Don't worry about it. User bin.net. That way, we tell the interpreter, hey, this is a script that needs to be interpreted with the .NET. I guess you could use it as an interpreter. I say interpret, and it's a bit of a misleading term. It's a bit of an incorrect term because it's not being interpreted. It's actually being compiled and then ran for you. But it almost is like, hey, it's interpreting with extra steps, probably, right? I know it's very much not, but so here what we get to do is we can make the script.cs executable, the chmod, and then we can just do script.cs, and that will result in the very same output. And in fact, at that point, it doesn't have to be script.cs. It can just be script. It's just executable as that. And now you're writing just sort of script, obviously, script. You're targeting the one that's right here. If you have this, for example, in your path, then you can just run things, right? Like if you have a lot of your little like .NET written utilities, you get to just sort of like run them. So you can have some for, I don't know, sorting your files, working with your files, changing some things about, like for example, the CLI that I mentioned here with like Amnesia, it doesn't really have to be included, right? Like it doesn't have to be a sort of command line application. It can also be just a set of these like sort of script files requiring .NET. And then, you just sort of like add them to your path and just use them. That's if you are going to require the SDK to be installed on the client's computer, right? Also, you get to build them. You genuinely build them, publish them. You get to publish the scripts as well. If you really want, and if you really want an actual like executable from that, and that's what you want to ship, you can. All right. I think that kind of does it. I think that's basically all I wanted to show. Very cool feature, beautiful feature. Really love this sort of like tracks with like in the last couple of years with the direction that .NET is having it as like really towards and not just like as the only direction, but as one of its like direction to really make the onboarding like super easy and make the simplification of it like broaden the use case pool of .NET, because normally the barrier would probably kind of be like, hey, like I want to test something real quick. You'd probably go to like live interpreting of .NET and sort of just like try something out there. Maybe you use the immediate window in something like Visual Studio. Um, but obviously the results and the scripts from there aren't being saved anywhere, and doing anything a little more complex, like, an API, God forbid, right? Is a little overboard. But with something like this, it's a beautiful onboarding thing. If you just want to make a quick Discord bot or something, just man, it's easy, right? Include the NuGet package, whatever you're using, boom, 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 write it in one single file, and you got it. I That's probably one of the strongest sort of arguments for this feature that I have, being the sort of live documentation slash library onboarding and C# learning as something for this feature. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to play around with the feature. If you want to try it out, you can just go to dot.net, where you get to download the where if you click like view more versions, you get to download and try it out for yourself. And if .NET 10 is already released, then you can already try it with your LTS of .NET. One more thing I wanted to show you is the documentation page. So if you go, both of these links should be in the description of this video if I don't forget. There's a cute little tutorial here about file-based C# programs where they make like a ASCII art sort of application. However, this won't work for you if you're on the RC1 version, because passing arguments doesn't work currently. So obviously, like when they pass in like this is the command line, this won't like work. Args for you will be just like empty or null. This is fixed again, and in later versions, this should work as expected. So you can just sort of browse through this. They show you a couple of these things. And then there's another link for the preprocessor directives, where this is a sort of comprehensive list of like, okay, what all sorts of directives can I use here? Like this sort of like web one, right? Or, you can target a specific framework or language version. That's really cool to be like playing around with other things, packages, projects, all sorts of stuff here, right? So very cool. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Have fun coding.